All right, welcome everyone. It is Thursday, bright and early. We have a special podcast for you. A couple weeks ago, we had met with Nolan, the first ever Neuralink patient, and it just sparked my interest even more. And what better way than to talk to Ryan, who I had met at the Takeover last year, and actually at a couple of other Tesla events. Uh, and he runs the largest Neuralink podcast. Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, John? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us this morning. And I know you are a very busy man, but Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background, and then let's get into like why, out of all things, start a Neuralink podcast.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I studied civil engineering for my undergrad, and then worked at Tesla as an intern during that schooling. After doing undergrad, I did another internship on the charging infrastructure team at Tesla, and then went to grad school. And then after grad school, I started this podcast. Um, it was because I was basically super interested in Tesla, in Elon, and Tim Urban released this lengthy blog post that was it's as long as a novel, but it was so fun to read through that. And then Elon went on Joe Rogan's podcast, and both of these, the blog post by Tim Urban talking about Neuralink and Elon talking about Neuralink on Joe Rogan, those two really just made me realize that this was going to be a game-changing company for so many people. And that's really what made me start the podcast. Was I just realized, like, there's no company that resonates with me more than a company that could help people cure their depression or resolve issues related to like blindness or paralysis or dementia. These things are just, it's like, I love the mission of Tesla and Elon's other companies, but if you have somebody who has a debilitating brain disorder and then they can have that resolved, that would be huge for them and their family and their friends.
Yeah, tell us a little bit, about like potentially the origin story of Neuralink, from your understanding, and what brought about this company. Because again, I met with Nolan, and you were exactly right, and I love how you stated that where there may not be another company with a cooler mission or a bigger impact, because you look at someone like Nolan, who and really the people that are most impacted are his family members, which he was very clear about. They're the ones who pretty much had to change their whole life to help take care of him, because he cannot any longer take care of himself. And so something like Neuralink will help people like paraplegics, and people with just disabilities, and will help them to be more functioning and be able to take more control, as long as and so, like, even for him, he says since Neuralink, it's just, it's taken a lot of responsibility even off their back. And so, tell us a little bit about the origin story of Neuralink.
Sure. Well, so the first that I publicly heard of Elon mentioning anything about Neuralink was, I believe, at a Recode conference. It was with Kara Swisher in 2015. Yeah. And he brought up this idea of a neural lace that you could use the brain's vasculature network to implant something that could reach all areas of the brain and basically help humans connect with computers or digital devices to not have AI run way past us. And that same idea is what sparked him to start the company. Obviously, they've changed the idea now from having that like kind of neural lace concept to just a single brain implant. Eventually, I think they'll get to this point where they will want to have many implants, or a larger implant, or even one that replaces like your full skull. And that if they do that, that's probably at least 2 decades away. Um, but yeah, so I guess there's two main missions for Neuralink. One is the longer term grand vision that Elon's always had, which is connecting humans to digital devices for long term AI symbiosis, and just making sure that our collective human desires don't misalign with what digital devices end up choosing to do. Uh, there's always all these concerns about AI running away or engaging in things that we don't want it to engage in. Well, if you can interact with it or interface with it from your brain to a computer, then you're basically joining the team. And so Elon's popular phrase is, if you can't beat AI, then join it. And then in the shorter term, they have so many amazing, great goals. But the main thing is just they want to help anybody who has a debilitating brain or spine disorder. And so, like somebody who has depression, dementia, blindness, morbid obesity, tinnitus or ringing in the ears, and plenty of other neurological issues could benefit from having a Neuralink. And the first patient that they did a human trial in was Nolan. He's paraplegic, like you said, and now being able to use his computer, he has a new level of digital freedom that he didn't have before.
Yeah.
Imagine going from you or I not having access to a computer, and then we do, like one day we don't and one day we do. It's a huge game changer.
Yeah, I mean, especially for someone like him, where I mean, this is all also access to what everyone is doing today. So in some ways, when you don't have access to a computer or a phone to do things, you're really missing out on what's happening digitally. I mean, obviously, it helps you probably be more present, but you really are, missing out on things that are happening real time, like on X and stuff, right? How do
Absolutely.
you know, how does Neuralink ensure that that the implant integrates seamlessly with the brain's natural functions without causing, any issues?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question, and it probably is the number one most difficult thing that Neuralink's facing right now, which is essentially this material science issue of or challenge of trying to get materials that will work well to seal the link implant and that package that gets inserted into the skull or replaces the skull, and then also have materials that can go into the brain tissue and stay there and not cause an infection, not cause extra bleeding, not cause the brain to attack it. And so, like, basically coming up with the right materials that will work well for the functions that they want, but also not damage the brain. It's like a very, very difficult challenge. But the approach that they're taking is to have as small of insertions into the brain as possible, and at some scale, they're operating at a micron scale. At that scale, the brain doesn't even realize that there's something in there, or at least,
Crazy.
yeah, it's like if the brain doesn't realize it's there, then it's not going to send things to attack it. So for those who are not familiar, basically Neuralink has this surgical robot that performs similar to like we would use a sewing machine. In fact, they call it a sew bot, or they used to call it a sew bot, where basically this skilled operator is using the robot to insert with a needle these tiny threads that go into the brain tissue and like loop in there. And then on those threads that are being inserted, they're so tiny, but they have a little electrodes that detect voltage spikes in the brain. And from understanding that information, you can you can understand what the brain is thinking, doing, or feeling. And because basically, so to answer your question, it's so small that the brain
Wow.
doesn't realize, and that causes less likely for there to be infection.
What do you think, obviously now that you're in this space, but, is anyone even close to doing anything like this? I mean, just, I don't know, you would know a lot more about just because you're living in this space. I mean, obviously I could talk of Tesla all day, and I know you probably could too as well. But like I do know that there's been so much advancement in sciences and things like that, especially since 2003 when my mom passed away. And so it's 2024 and it's been 21 years. And so I know that there's been so many like advancements since that time. But is anyone even close in this space building something like a little spaceship floating through your brain? What does the market even look like in this space?
Mhm. Yeah, there are some companies that are working on cool projects, and some have quite similar missions to address neurological conditions. One that comes to mind is Precision Neuroscience. Um, I believe they have a something that you can insert into like a tiny slit in the brain, and that will detect electrical information, and they can't do the exact same types of things that Neuralink aspires to do because they're just simply getting less information. Um, but they'll be able to help with addressing some neurological conditions. There are other companies that have taken different approaches. Synchron, for example, has this thing that they insert into the blood vasculature of the brain, and that they'll also be able to get a good amount of information. But the way that I see this shaping up longer term is likely Elon is just so amazingly good at getting teams to like be inspired to work on these hard problems, and the teams that he assembles are superior in almost every way to the competition. And we see
Yeah.
this like you see this at Tesla, right?
Yeah. SpaceX
Uh,
too.
yeah, exactly. It's SpaceX, and I assume the same is true at Boring Company. I've met employees, like people that I used to work with at Tesla, like they're amazing. And people that I know who I went to school with that work at SpaceX now, they were equally amazing. And I think people don't realize that that's really what a company is. Like the company is as good as the quality of its people. And
Yeah.
when you have ace players that are exiting college, graduating at the top of their class, super passionate about what they're working on, then you're going to have this amplification of the team. Like if A player is working alongside three other A players, they're going to create a fantastic product that's like 10 times better than a B player working with three other B players, because those B players are less likely to stay that incremental hour in the office. They're less likely to respond to an email at 11 p.m. They're less likely, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's really like, I just don't think people realize this. It bothers me a lot actually with Tesla as an investment. Like people, they should really realize like, okay, you're not investing in some arbitrary thing. You're actually investing in the people that work at Tesla.
Yeah.
Elon's their manager. He's the most effective manager in the world. And they're all like willing to break their backs and bodies for this company and for the mission and for their teammates, for their other coworkers.
Yeah. I
Um,
can't.
and
Oh, sorry. I can't speak to, Neuralink as far as like, I don't know how much hop over, let's say from like X or SpaceX to Neuralink. But what I can say is what is crazy about all of Elon's companies, and Neuralink obviously would be included in that, is that he's able to recruit the top talent. So I'm like literally reiterating what you're saying, the top talent, and they get bought into the mission. And more importantly, if you get bored doing one thing, you're like, you know what, I don't want to make I don't want to play with the Tesla AI today. I want to go and work on maybe like whatever on the SpaceX rocket engines, or I want to go work on a social media platform. I mean, you see this time and time again. And so that's how you can retain the best talent, is that you have people that can move from the most innovative companies on the planet right now. If they get bored, right? I've seen it. You can even go to XAI now. I mean, it's just, but yeah, I think that is the differentiator in all of this.
Yeah, completely agree. I know there's one person in particular that I'm thinking of that worked at Neuralink and at X when Twitter was first being taken over. And being able to split that time, I think, is really valuable. And if you have a fantastic contributor, then you want to retain them as much as possible. And if they have skills that can
Exactly.
translate, it's huge. Well, so I guess the point of me bringing up this team is that the people that I've met at Neuralink are equally, and in some cases more capable and fantastic, and also super passionate. A lot of times these employees have somebody that they know in their family or their best friend who suffers from something that is debilitating. They cannot live a life that they once knew. And so if somebody has like their aunt or their uncle or even their younger brother, or their daughter or son has paralysis and or some other condition, has severe depression, like Neuralink right now is in a place to give them hope for the future. And that's a
Yeah.
huge, I think that's also an underrated aspect of what they're working on right now. But in the future, they'll literally be able to fix some of these issues.
So you went into a little bit about how there's this, the Neuralink is so small that essentially the brain can't detect it, it won't attack it. But how does something so small then translate, like signals into actionable actions?
Sure.
Pretty much what's happening with Nolan right now.
Yeah. Well, so the brain is, I've come to learn that the brain is essentially just electrochemical uh, reactions that happen. And if you understand those electric signals, then you can understand what the brain sees, feels, or does, and or hears, or perceives. And with that information, you can very exactly understand what Nolan wants to do with his arms, um, what he's thinking about, or in the future they'll be able to understand what he's thinking about. Right now, the implant is in the motor cortex, so they can understand what he wants to physically move. I guess a little bit of context for folks who don't know. When people are paralyzed, their brain is still able to send information to their limbs. It's simply that they have a spinal cord break, and therefore the signals from their brain, they just do not physically get past the spinal cord break to the part of the spinal cord that would send signals to their limbs.
Yeah.
So in Nolan's case, like if you could just figure out what the brain is trying to tell, or what it is telling the spinal cord to do, and the signals are just not getting there, and then you have an implant downstream of the spinal cord break, then you would be able to stimulate movement. And that's like the hope for the future of curing paralysis, or resolving that for these folks. In Nolan's case right now, they're simply understanding what he wants to do with a mouse cursor and what he plans to do. Like basically, before we do anything, our brain is already planning, and then it takes action. Well, in his case, like instead of doing the actual physical action of moving a computer cursor to a specific spot on the screen, instead he just has to like be ready to do it or be thinking I'm gonna do it, and then Neuralink is reading those signals from him planning to do it, and then just like sending that to the computer and acting on it as though he did move the mouse.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's incredible. People that, I think there's always been those jokes of like, oh, well, the last thing I would want to do is give Neuralink, Elon access to my brain with data. Like, how does Neuralink navigate the whole privacy issue? What are your thoughts even behind that?
Right now, I think it's not so big of an issue, but I understand people's concerns in the longer term. Um, you know, as technology, consumer technology improves, uh, and becomes more functional, there's more room for, hacking, and the stronger and more powerful it gets, basically the more responsibility there is. And in Neuralink's case, I feel personally confident that the team has every desire possible to keep this as safe and secure as they can, because they have skin in the game, right? Like if Michael or Zach or whoever the employee's name is working on something, and they have a family member who suffers from a disorder, then they know, like, they want to make that as bulletproof or whatever as possible.
Yeah. Yep.
um yeah.
What would you say? So obviously Neuralink right now, like the biggest, once they start putting it obviously in most patients, I don't know if they've already selected a second patient or if they've selected them and they've shared who that was. But do you think Neuralink is even thinking, okay, so our first, and again, this is going to take years, as we know, to do, but like, really the first need for this is just for medical issues or to help people that have disabilities. Do you think that there's ever a world where they would be doing this for like everyday things, for like normal activities?
Yeah, absolutely. They're aspiring to make this available for every human on the planet and more. Like, they want it to be implanted even in, like, you wouldn't you wouldn't have to necessarily like implant it in the same way into like a Tesla Optimus bot. You wouldn't have to implant it in the same way that you would with a human, but you could connect Neuralink to any digital device. You could connect it to, I mean, most animals too. Like, you could connect this to your dog, right? So, and and try to understand or learn what it's feeling or what it wants, or what it's doing. Um, so the the addressable market in business terms, the total addressable market is at least, their goal is to have it be any human who
Yeah.
wants one, and they're building everything they possibly can to make that a reality. So they're making it so that their surgical robot um, can perform the procedure in 600 seconds or 10 minutes or under. And it's like, you just go into this clinic, into a Neuralink clinic, and then you 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 just like, you don't have to have anything done. You just get the procedure and you're out in 10 minutes. It's not like you have to go under general anesthesia. It's not like you have to check into the hospital and have a neurosurgeon who's certified, who's done decades of training. Like, Neuralink won't need that. And that's what allows them to make it scalable, because if they had neurosurgeons that were required to perform the surgery, there's simply not enough neurosurgeons that have enough training to do all of them.
Yeah.
They just like how Tesla wants to get to huge volume manufacturing at scale, Neuralink wants to do this where the procedure is doable in mass.
Yeah. So we have in the past year or two, we had Nolan who came into the world as far as being known as the first ever Neuralink patient. What were your expectations when I think this announcement came and when you heard about it? And then what were like the big wins that you're seeing today? Because I think he's doing stuff where I think he posted yesterday, I want to stay up 72 hours and just see if
Yeah.
Neuralink can go. And then people were responding to him, dude, that's not good for your brain. And
Yeah.
he's like, I won't hurt myself if I can stay up 72 hours. But it's just like, how big of a deal was it to have someone like Nolan? And then like what were the big wins that you saw that came out of having the first ever Neuralink patient? And it's still ongoing. I mean, he told us he's checking in with them on a regular basis, even now.
Right. Yeah, this list is so long that I'm gonna have a difficult time like
The
keeping
most
all these
important
items.
ones.
Okay, yeah. Gosh, I mean, I think he is such a great advocate for the company and the technology. Like his attitude, number one, has gotten him through. I mean, I haven't even met him yet. I'm going to in a few days, but um, based on all the interviews that I've seen of him and just following him and staying up to date on learning more about him, like his attitude and personality have probably gotten him through so many difficult times in his life. And now, like, the world is so fortunate to see him basically as an example for what Neuralink can enable. And this is the worst it's ever going to be, or near the worst it's ever going to be. So, for him to always be so positive and just have that great attitude, I think makes it so that it inspires the next person to, number one, care about the technology, number two, feel more comfortable potentially getting the implant in the future, and number three, like maybe just as simply as becoming more educated about the brain or about this type of technology, that helps move the ball forward a lot. And I think like me having started this podcast and YouTube channel, I've started to realize how important that is. Like I kind of knew when I first started that I wanted to help educate folks and hopefully inspire younger folks to like maybe study neuroscience if they were on the fence of studying neuroscience or something else. Maybe if they realize that Elon's working on this cool project, it will just be enough to persuade them to say, okay, yeah, like this could help my grandma who passed away. This could have helped my grandma who passed away from, I mean, like some
Yeah.
real issue. Like mine didn't, but I'm hypothetically. So I guess to answer, I want to make sure I answer your questions. The Nolan is just the first, right? And they've already actually implanted in the second person. It's a guy named Alex. He's certainly not public facing in the way that Nolan is, which I totally understand. Like I feel like if I was in his position, it'd be really tough. And I feel like there's security and safety issues too. So, but they've implanted in the second. All seems to have gone well. The primary issue that was happening with Nolan's implant was essentially resolved with the second implant, and they're targeting having a third implantation before the end of the year. And I think the goal is a handful more, maybe 5 to 10 more next year. And after that, they want to have it available for everybody en masse.
And when you say implant, is that for other people, or do you need one more implant than the first one for one person?
You could get multiple. My guess is in the future they'll just have a larger implant rather than like somebody getting many multiple implants. But the second, there's really like a second person who got one, and then they also got breakthrough device designation for their second product, which is called blind sight, and that'll help folks who may have never seen before see for the first time, or people who
Wow.
had vision and restore it.
Yeah, that's insane. You know, actually, well, that just leads me to how about off the top of your head, or what are the overall products that they're even offering? So it sounds like they have the second product. There's this first one, or maybe you shared the second one, and we already know what the first one is.
Yeah, so the first one is called telepathy, and it's really like you could get telepathic powers where Nolan can control any digital device with just his mind. And so, in theory, you could have, like a very simple example would be a Tesla right now. You could summon a Tesla, and that the amount of information that it takes being transferred from your phone to the car is very little. So that's quite like low hanging fruit. It's pretty easy for Nolan to do that type of thing in theory. They I'm not sure they've gotten to that point where he's connecting to his phone. I think they have. But when they get to there, it's gonna be very simple. And he's literally just like controlling a car with his mind. That's like so it's crazy. It's true telepathy, you know? And then with blind sight, their next product, yeah, it'll help with vision, and then after that, they'll probably work on things that are related to like hearing and restoring functions of like the auditory cortex, and plenty of other things down the road in deeper brain regions to help with like depression or more more difficult things like emotions or feelings.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. What would you say is like, so we talked a little bit about potentially scaling and, getting it to the point where, a lot of people can have it. Have they talked about, or have they been public at all about how they will have that economic scale? Or,
Mhm.
what's because only got, I mean, obviously they only have like one, or they have two patients right now. Obviously they probably have a lot more. But how would we get this to everyone from an economies of scale perspective?
Sure. Okay, so they've basically they've raised funding from like series A, B, C rounds, and I think their latest one was their Series D. So they have a lot of funding. Obviously, Elon himself could fund this multiple times over with just like if he just sold a little Tesla stock, he could. So they're not short on the money side.
Yeah.
Um, and then as far as like getting this cost down of the actual implant, Elon's recently talked about how like they want to get this to a place where it's $1,000 or $2,000, and to get to that would take a lot of hard work and a lot of things to go right. But in order to get to there, like Neuralink's building this huge clinic in Austin to try to make it where people can just walk in and walk out, basically. I mean, some at the beginning will be like non-elective procedures, and those will be more likely to get covered by Medicare. Um, Afterwards, when they're elective procedures, it'll be most likely out of pocket. But if you have like super intelligence directly connected to you, then it's like worth it.
Yeah.
And then so the surgical robot is one of the main things too, is if you have the surgical robot that can perform the entire surgery, then it becomes similar to LASIK in the way that, like, yes, you need a skilled operator to operate the laser to perform that eye surgery. People thought it was really dangerous at first, but they start to quickly realize that, oh, actually, if I had just a human like controlling this laser, it's like impossible to have the appropriate precision for cutting your eyeball. So having a human control a robot is way safer, it's cheaper, it's more effective, and that's what they're going to do with the surgical implant.
How would you say, you know, with Neuralink, and obviously this is a totally, that's the crazy thing about this company. Obviously, it's a different type of science than all the other sciences that, like, let's say Tesla and SpaceX and even Boring Company are accomplishing. How do they balance like insane, you know, innovation, just like innovating at a crazy clip versus like, you know, validating that, you know, the work that they're doing isn't gonna, let's say, hurt humans or kind of match the medical requirements that we have.
Yeah, gosh, these questions are so good. The FDA, or Food and Drug Administration, oversees medical implants, and so basically they have these processes in place to make sure that devices that go to market are safe and effective. Uh, the first things that Neuralink was demonstrating that could prove they have working data was just testing in the lab, right? So they would create these implants, try to put them into like a salty brine or liquid, and just heat it up or cool it down, and try to get some expansion and contraction of the package, and try to just rigorously test it. And they still perform that testing, and they try to recreate a physical environment that's similar to the brain, and then they push it and they try to have a physical environment that's way more intense than the brain, and they try to put it through rapid cycles. Or actually, I guess it's not as necessary to put it through rapid cycles in the case of the brain, but I assume they just do some pretty intense testing in environments that are more extreme than the brain. And then the second type of testing is in animal models. So they tested like early implants in rats, and then they tested in pigs and sheep, and since then they've tested in monkeys, and monkeys and pigs apparently have brains that are quite similar to humans.
Um, oh, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Well, so now they've started the human trials, and that's the next step for the FDA.
So what is gonna? So I actually went to the Neuralink. You know, I think it's in Del Valle is the actual city like address, and I saw it looks like they literally building like a jungle out there, partially probably because of the food for all the animals and stuff. But do you know what are they building out there? And then where are they? I think obviously they're based out of the Bay Area at the moment, or they're doing things out here. But what's going to be the difference between the facilities in Austin area versus, you know, the stuff that they're potentially doing in the Bay Area?
Yeah. So they are based out of Fremont, California, kind of close to the Tesla factory. Um, they have at least a couple buildings up there, uh, mostly with like a lab space, and like, I guess, co-working or office type space. They also have areas for animals, and then Austin is a huge location for them. Like they're pretty much going to have everything. They have a clinic that they're building, um, animal space, uh, other labs, and an employee office space. So they're definitely, like with Elon's all of his companies, like they're expanding their presence in Austin and the greater Texas, like in Texas. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they continue expanding more in Northern California as well, just because there's a lot of like engineering talent that easily flows up there. But I think the aspiration is to just grow that Austin site to be pretty substantial.
What would you say, like what, at least from what we've seen or what they've publicly put out there, what are some of the newer technologies? And I don't know if it's, more of the stuff, the work that they're doing for helping people not deal with being blind anymore. But what are the things that they're testing on animals that get you excited about what's coming next?
Hmm. Um,
If they've even shared that. So I don't know if they've shared like the test that they're doing on the animals right now.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the last testing that they do in animals prior to humans is quite similar. Like it's rare that, or I think well, especially now that they've tested in humans, it's like the amount of total like unexpected situations happening is decreasing, right? Like they have enough testing now where the likelihood that they're going to get blindsided by something is like it's just less likely, less and less likely. um but I guess one thing that was different from their testing in the monkeys versus the human, or versus Nolan, was Nolan and humans' brains move more than they thought. So
It's
like the
crazy.
amount of, yeah, and it's all relative, right? Because like if you or I move our hands, like of course we're moving way more than our brain is, but in that constrained environment in the skull, and you're operating at a micron scale for implanting or inserting these threads into the brain tissue, like if your brain is moving up and down 1 to 3 millimeters, then that's a ginormous amount of a gigantic amount of movement. And you have to target those specific areas to make sure you're not hitting blood vessels. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think just the testing is a critical piece of all of this. I think it, like I personally think it's the weighing all the pros and cons. I think I'd rather have animal testing than not.
Well,
And I think you were kind of alluding to this, like the the environment that they're building for their animals is second to none. Like they treat their animals like total royalty.
actually answer that question. So yeah, how are they taking care of their animals? Or and they've I know they put out. I mean, I haven't followed it closely. I do know that they have released information about their animal testing.
Yeah, so basically they've built this environment that's super rich and close to the natural environment that these monkeys would live in anyway. They're free to do like whatever they want. Um, all of the testing is voluntary in that the animal has a choice to go into a designated testing area. If they're not in that area, then testing's not going to be performed. And then when they're not doing anything, like they have what you or I would think of as like gourmet meals. So like these animals get treated way better at Neuralink than they would at any other lab, for example. And then a lot of the very initial concerns that first came out were from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Basically, this group like doesn't like any testing in animals at all. I guess that's one debate to be had of like, do you want any animal testing? If you fall on the side of yes, it's okay to do it as long as you're uh, not killing animals recklessly and you really have good reason for doing the testing, then Neuralink's doing all of that as best as possible. Like the monkeys that they used that eventually were euthanized, that was the plan. Like you the animals that, or the monkeys that they initially had access to, like they're not getting monkeys that are 100% healthy because the device safety is unknown and the efficacy is unknown. So like you don't want to test this device in a perfectly healthy monkey. Instead, You want to test this device in a monkey that's already in a not so great spot, and because they're already unhealthy and they're only healthy enough for one anesthetic event, then you like do the anesthesia, you do the procedure, you get as much data as you can, and then the plan is already, okay, this monkey is super sick, euthanization for that monkey. Over time, as the safety of the device improves and you start to understand like how safe it is, then you can start to test in animals that are more healthy. And they've tested in a monkey in particular called named Pager, that they showed him playing a video game with just his mind. They played ping pong, the video game Pong, with just his mind. And now it's been 4 or 5 years since then, and he had his implant replaced, and he's still happy and healthy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, and also too, I mean, knowing Elon's companies, you're talking, I mean, he's explained this and gone off about this, right? The insane amount of complexities that even SpaceX has had to deal with, like testing if rocket launches impact seals, and they had to put like headphones on seals, and then they had to do the math on whether a whale will get hit by a Starship booster, and like what's the likelihood. And then I think Elon joked at one of these Pennsylvania TED or Pennsylvania talks when he was on the road for the Trump rally. It was just like, honestly, if the whale is going to get hit by a booster, it was probably just, it was supposed to happen.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
likely it was supposed to happen. That's how. But yeah, I mean, and all that to say, with Neuralink, these guys have to move fast. They're dealing with, probably with the FDA, with insane amount of regulations, and they're going to do everything that they can that the following the regulations, especially to innovate, is not going to impact that, right? The last thing that they want is slap with something like, hey, stop all your work. They're not going to want to do that. And thankfully, Elon's already trained in that way. I mean, obviously there's a different issue with the fact that there's overregulation, but in this case, Elon knows how to deal with insane amount of regulation. I mean, just think of cars, just think of, SpaceX. Now think of probably what, the insane amount of stuff having to deal with, just building a tunnel underneath Las Vegas airport, from the airport all the way to the strip. So you have, I feel like they're in good hands. So hopefully that won't be the case, of that. And I think you mentioned a little bit, but what do you like when you think of the next couple of years? What are you looking forward to most?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about the regulation and Elon's experience is totally accurate. And then looking forward to the most, I think, so part of it is on Neuralink side, just like continuing to make progress in the next patient and the next patient, and hopefully they have good results. And um, I think things will go well on their end, and I have no doubt that they're gonna continue hiring the best people and just making good progress. Uh, the thing that initially comes to mind is I want the public to become more aware of what Neuralink is doing. Like it,
Yeah,
it makes it more likely that they're going to be able to have access to participants for the study who are more aligned with what they're specifically wanting. It also makes it more likely that they're going to have like the next incremental great hire. It makes it more likely that, like the next young person is going to study and dedicate their life to neuroscience. So like all these knock-on effects of just increased awareness of what the company is doing, um, is a huge that it's a huge benefit for society at large. Actually, another benefit too that's aligned with this is like just having you or I have these conversations,
yeah,
or like like maybe somebody that knows you is right now extremely apprehensive to the idea of ever getting a brain chip implant. Well, if they hear our conversation and just become like just a little curious, and then they watch something else, and then they just have that exposure to the concept, or they know a friend of a friend who got one, then it's more likely that they'll come around to the idea in the future of getting one. And that's a huge plus. So I think just awareness of Neuralink and the fact that Neuralink itself is inspiring people to like study neuroscience in the first place. These are all tremendously good. And I think in the next few years, we're just going to continue to see increased awareness of what the company's doing.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to have you on today, just because you are, running an amazing podcast, and again, there's you're really like when you think of experts in the space, like I think of you, and so I'm just thankful that you came to take over this past year, and I'm thankful that you're here today. So I keep doing your work, and that's why I thought it'd be really cool to give exposure to our community of all the stuff that you're doing. Because there's a lot of overlap with the Elon companies, but all of us know friends with disabilities, and I think that Neuralink and the work that they're doing, hopefully, can be accelerated. It's crazy how much there's like you just think of Elon's companies, and like we all want to accelerate. What we don't want is blockers, and that's what we've seen, and so. But yeah, we all know someone with disabilities, and so we all want them to have this, functionality that can really just change their outlook on life. Because I think you talk to Nolan again, this has been life changing for him. His family no longer has to, watch him the whole night anymore, right? They can walk away, and really, your family is the one impacted the most when you have a disability, like getting around and stuff. So. I think, yeah. So thank you for all the work you're doing. I hope this conversation has, sparked interest for people. Because again, we all know someone with some type of disability, or we may even know someone that may not be able to see. And so it's so important for Neuralink's work and to hopefully get us to that place.
Totally.
So, yeah, go ahead.
And if somebody's interested in joining their patient registry, or know somebody with paraplegia or with like blindness, then you can apply to Neuralink's patient registry at neuralink.com/patient-registry. And it's available right now in the US, Canada, and the UK. They're probably going to start doing more testing or trials in Canada and in the UK in the future.
So tell us how can people find you? You are tagged on X for your personal handle and your the Neura Pod, but how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on X. I love the platform. You and I could have this conversation about X or about Tesla. Like, we just love his companies. But yeah, I'm most active on X, and then YouTube, same handles, like at Neura Pod, NEURAPOD, and yeah, you can find me there.
Sounds good. And he is tagged. If you're watching on YouTube, he is tagged in the description as well. So subscribe to his channel to kind of stay up to date on all of the things that are happening in the Neuralink space. But yeah, Ryan, thanks for being here. Hopefully, as Neuralink continues to innovate, hopefully we can have you back on sometime soon. And thank you again for your time this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for chatting, John. Appreciate it.